Let's talk about restoring the middle class. I know our viewers are interested in hearing about that as well.
Yeah, I mean, the big issues for the middle class is inflation and the capacity to own a home. If Americans can't buy a home, we lose the middle class in our country. Because when you own a home, it not only, you care about your community, you care about your police, your firefighters, your education, you go to the PTA meetings, you care about your neighbors, about appearance, but more importantly, you have equity. You have access to equity, because you can take a second mortgage. So if you have an entrepreneurial impulse, if you want to build a sporting goods store or a yoga studio or a bowling alley or a saloon, you have the access to do that. And that's when, when we got all these Americans in a home with the GI Bill after World War II, that created the American middle class, and it as the greatest economic engine in the history of mankind. When I was a boy, America owned half the wealth on the face of the earth. And we were, we were making things because you had all these entrepreneurs, building stuff. And now that's gone. And, we have, for the first time, we have a generation of kids. I have 7 kids. One of them is 40, and he has a home. The other ones all went to the best colleges. They went to they have great jobs, and none of them can afford a home. And so the homes are all being built, bought, purchased by BlackRock, State Street, and Vanguard, these giant hedge funds that are coming in that already own 88% of the S&P 500. So they own all the business, and now they're coming in and trying to, turn us into a feudal aristocracy where the rich own the land and you can't have a middle class.
So let's talk about these names, and tell me, what do you think about when I say Bill Gates, George Soros, and some of the other elite?
Yeah, I mean, I think that the Gates and Soros, and I know most about Gates, because I've written a book about him, and that what he calls philanthrocapitalism, which is you use philanthropy to make yourself rich, and you use it strategically, and that's what he's done again and again. He's gotten control of the World Health Organization so that they mandate vaccines all over the world, and the companies that make those vaccines are Gates is, in many of them, the major shareholder. And he did the same thing with the Green Revolution. He got a hold of the regulatory agencies in African countries and forced them to change the nature of agriculture. There's 20,000 generations of agriculture of people growing crops like sorghum and plantains and yucca and all these plants for subsistence. And he said, no, we're going to transfer them all to these, GMO monocultures of corn, and then we're going to bring in companies that he owns, Kraft, Coca-Cola, McDonald's, these big food companies, processing companies, to buy that, and that's going to be the deal. And then, of course, during COVID, all of that shut down, and you had, there's 30 million Africans now as a direct result of Gates's policy who are now on the edge of starvation.
Tell that story that you shared with me a couple of years ago about the vaccines that Gates sent over supposedly for women that, I don't know, was to control birth control or what? I don't remember exactly.
That's another, I think the real tell was what happened with the DTP vaccine, which is diphtheria, tetanus, and pertussis. Because of Gates pushing this shot, it's now the #1 vaccine in the world, DTP. And it's mainly given in Africa. That particular shot is discontinued in the United States because it was killing or badly injuring 1 out of every 300 kids who took it. We ended it in Europe and the United States, but Gates is giving it to every kid in Africa. And in 2017, he asked the Danish government for money to support this program, and it said, we've saved 20 million kids. The Danish government said, can you show us the data? He couldn't. So the Danish government went and did its own study, and they had records of 30 years of this vaccine in a country called Guinea-Bissau. And they looked at the records, and what they realized in retrospect, which they were never seeing, is that the girls who were getting that vaccine at 6 months of age were 10 times more likely to die over the next 6 months as children who didn't get it. Wow. And they were dying of things that nobody on the ground had ever associated with vaccination. They were dying of anemia and bilharzia and malaria and dysentery, and nobody had ever made the connection that it's only the girls who got the vaccine who were dying of those things, that the other kids were much healthier. And the Danish government had retained the greatest vaccine scientists. All of them were pro-vaccine. A guy called Peter Aaby, who's like a deity in that space, and another guy called Sigrid Morgensen. And a whole team of scientists knew that, and those scientists started speaking up and saying, you got to discontinue this vaccine, and their careers, Gates made sure their careers were destroyed. So that's when I understood that he actually understands what he's doing. And this is not just him being hypnotized. He knows that this is wrong because this science was indisputable.